The prairie stretched endlessly beneath the burning afternoon sun, a wide golden sea swaying with the whisper of dry wind. Cole Maddox rode through it with the steady, deliberate pace of a man who understood the land as well as he understood his own heartbeat. His horse, Jasper, moved confidently beneath him, used to the long rides and the quiet strength of the giant rancher on his back. Cole's shoulders were broad enough to cast a shadow bigger than most men, and his reputation had grown just as large, though he never asked for it. Folks said he could lift a steer off the ground or break a saddle in half with his bare hands. But anyone who knew him also knew he had the gentlest touch with a wounded animal and spoke with a calmness that soothed more than it startled. He had been out checking the far pasture fences, making sure none of the cattle had wandered toward the canyon, when he began the trail home. Dust rose in gentle clouds behind him as he crossed the old wooden bridge leading to his property. The creek below sparkled faintly, its thin waterline proof of a dry season. Cole shifted in his saddle and was about to give Jasper a nudge forward when he heard a faint rustle in the brush off to his right. He tightened the reins slightly, listening. It could have been a rabbit or a stray calf, maybe even a coyote. Out here, the land always spoke, you just had to know how to listen. But this sound wasn't the skittish scramble of an animal. It was hesitant, uneven, frightened. Cole swung his leg over and dropped to the ground, his boots thudding softly against the dusty earth. He took a careful step toward the noise. Before he could call out, a small figure burst from the bushes, stumbling onto the road and nearly collapsing. It was a girl, tiny, no older than 12, her hair tangled with leaves, her face smudged with dirt and streaked with dried tears. She clutched a torn satchel so tightly her knuckles were white. Cole froze, not wanting to scare her. But she didn't shy away from him. Instead, she ran toward him with desperate, uneven breaths, her small hands grabbing a fistful of his sleeve like she had finally found something solid in a collapsing world. "Sir, please," she gasped, struggling to speak between ragged breaths. "Please help." Cole lowered himself slowly, bending down so his massive size wouldn't overwhelm her. His voice was gentle, the calm rumble of someone who didn't need to raise his volume to show he cared. "Easy now," he murmured. "What's wrong?" Tears welled up in the girl's eyes instantly, as if the simple kindness in his voice loosened everything she'd been trying to hold together. "They want to hurt my mom," she whispered, trembling so hard he could feel it through her grip. "She's sick, she can't walk. They said they'd come back. They said they'd take her anyway." Cole felt something shift inside him, a deep, heavy instinct that woke like a sleeping bear. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed soft. "Who wants to hurt her?" She swallowed, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "The men from the mine. They said she owes them. They were yelling, kicking the door. I ran to find someone, anyone. I didn't know where to go. But I saw your ranch from the ridge and I thought, maybe." She didn't finish. Her voice cracked, and she looked down like she expected him to push her away, like she'd been told one too many times that her problems weren't worth anyone's trouble. "What's your name?" Cole asked. "Lila," she whispered. Cole nodded slowly. "Well, Lila, you did the right thing coming here." He stood up, and Lila instinctively took a step back, not in fear of him, but in awe of his towering frame. Cole Maddox was a mountain wearing a hat and boots, all muscle and quiet strength. But when he looked down at her, there was only honesty in his eyes. "Take me to your mother," he said, fastening his reins to the saddle horn. "Nobody is touching her, not while I'm breathing." Lila blinked up at him, disbelief mixing with hope. Her lips trembled. You mean it?" Cole rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle for such a massive man. "I don't say things I don't mean." The girl nodded quickly and turned toward the narrow trail leading away from the road. Cole whistled for Jasper to follow and walked beside her. Each step she took was hurried and anxious, but with Cole's long strides, he easily kept pace. The prairie wind picked up around them, carrying dust and tension on its back as they made their way toward the danger waiting beyond the cedar trees. And though Lila didn't know it yet, the men who threatened her mother had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Lila moved quickly through the narrow cedar-lined path, her steps light but urgent, every few seconds glancing back to be sure Cole was still behind her. She knew it would be impossible to lose track of a man of his size, but fear had wired her nerves so tightly that she needed the reassurance. Cole followed with long, steady strides, his eyes scanning the surroundings, alert for danger. The trees grew thicker as they climbed uphill, branches forming a dark canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into uneasy shadows. Cole could hear faint noises ahead, shouts carried by the wind, the thud of boots against wood, the sharp crack of something struck with force. Lila froze. Cole stopped beside her. The voices grew clearer. "Open this damn door. Last warning." A heavy kick slammed into something, likely the cabin door. Cole's jaw tightened. He placed a steadying hand on Lila's back. "Stay behind me," he said in a low, firm tone that carried the promise of safety. They stepped into a clearing where a small, weather-beaten cabin stood crookedly against the trees. Smoke rose in thin strands from its chimney, ghostly and weak. But what drew Cole's attention immediately were the three men outside. Rough and shaven, armed. One held a crowbar, another a rusted shotgun, and the third seemed content to use his boot as a battering ram. The doorframe shuddered each time he kicked it. Inside, a frail voice begged them to stop. Cole didn't hesitate. He stepped into the open without a word. The men didn't notice him at first, too busy shouting threats at the sick woman inside. Then one of them turned, and froze. His expression wavered between confusion and dread. "What the?" he muttered. Cole continued walking, each step measured and unhurried. He didn't have to posture. He didn't have to shout. His presence alone shifted the air. The leader of the group spat on the ground and squared his shoulders. "Maddox," he said, forcing bravado into his voice. "This ain't your business." Cole didn't answer immediately. He surveyed the damage. The broken wood around the lock, the muddy footprints on the door, the terrified shadows moving behind the window's torn curtain. "She's sick," Cole finally said. "You know that. She owes us," the man barked back. "You think you can just show up and scare us off? She'll pay what she owes, one way or another." Cole's eyes lowered, and though his face stayed calm, something dangerous flickered beneath the surface, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. "You threaten a woman who can't even stand," he said softly. "That tells me what kind of man you are." The man with the shotgun cocked it nervously. "Don't take another step, Maddox." Cole did. The shotgun shook in the man's hands. "Back off," the leader snapped at Cole. "You might be big, but you ain't bulletproof." Cole didn't answer. Instead, he reached the man nearest to him, the one holding the crowbar, and with one swift motion grabbed him by the back of his vest. The man yelped as Cole lifted him clean off the ground like he weighed no more than a sack of feed. His arms and legs flailed as Cole stepped aside and tossed him into the dirt with a thud that knocked the wind from his lungs. The other two staggered back in shock. The leader raised his hands. "All right, easy now." Cole's voice stayed low but carried more weight than a shout. "You three are done here." The man with the shotgun tried to aim again, but his hands trembled too much. Cole stepped forward once, and the man's nerve broke entirely. He threw the shotgun aside and backed away. "You've got 3 seconds, Cole said. "Take them." The 3 men didn't need a second warning. They turned and scrambled into the trees, tripping over roots in their haste. Only when their footsteps faded into the distance did Cole let out a controlled breath. Lila rushed past him with a small cry and threw open the cabin door. Inside, her mother lay on a straw-filled mattress, her face pale and drenched in sweat. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale labored. She tried to sit up, but her strength failed, and she sank back onto the thin blanket. Cole ducked into the cabin, filling nearly half the small room with his massive frame. He knelt beside the woman and gently checked her forehead. "Fever. Too high. Likely days without proper food or medicine. She needs help," he murmured. Lila's voice cracked. "Can you save her?" Cole looked from the sick woman to the terrified girl kneeling beside her. Then he nodded once, solid and certain. "I'm not leaving until she's better." He lifted the woman carefully, so carefully that Lila stared in disbelief at how gently a giant like him could move. Cole carried her outside, cradling her as though she were weightless. Lila walked close beside him, wiping tears from her cheeks. The men were gone. The danger was gone, but the work had. Cole carried Lila's mother as if she were made of fragile glass, his huge arms steady beneath her weightless feeling body. Lila stayed close to his side, clutching his shirt whenever the path narrowed. The forest around them dimmed with the approaching evening, and every sound echoed too loudly, the call of a lone bird, the crunch of leaves under Cole's boots, the faint groans of the sick woman. Cole didn't rush, but he didn't linger either. He walked with a confident, unwavering pace that made Lila feel, for the first time in days, that they were finally moving toward safety. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was dipping behind the distant ridge, painting the sky in deep reds and golds. Cole's house stood sturdy and welcome at the center of the open land, its wooden beams glowing warm in the fading light. He carried the woman straight inside and laid her gently in his spare room, a room he had kept clean even though no one had slept there in years. The bed was covered in thick quilts, and the wood stove already held the soft orange glow of a quietly burning fire. Cole had started it that morning, never expecting it to become the hearth that would keep a stranger alive. Lila hovered beside the bed, her eyes darting between her mother's face and Cole's hands as he fetched a basin of cool water. He wrung out a cloth and placed it carefully on the woman's forehead. She stirred weakly but didn't wake. Her breathing sounded too shallow, too strained. Cole studied her for a long moment before rolling up his sleeves. "I'll make her some broth," he said. "She'll need something warm in her." Lila nodded, though she looked as though she might collapse herself. Cole paused by the doorway. "You rest too, Lila. I'll keep watch." She looked up at him with trembling eyes. "You already helped us so much." Cole shook his head softly. "I'm not done yet." He made broth with steady, practiced movements, tossing in vegetables and herbs he kept for long winters and rough cattle drives. As it simmered, he cooked bread, stoked the fire, boiled water for tea, and checked on Lila's mother every few minutes. He stayed beside her through a full cycle of fever, helping her drink tiny spoonfuls, adjusting the blankets, changing the cloth on her forehead when it grew too hot. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering things too faint to understand. Sometimes Lila cried quietly at her side. Sometimes she fell asleep sitting up. Whenever her small body sagged with exhaustion, Cole gently guided her to the cot by the stove and covered her with a blanket. And every time she opened her eyes, she found him still there. By the third day, the fever broke. It wasn't sudden. It faded like a storm that had raged too long, leaving behind a calm so fragile that no one dared breathe too deeply. The woman's eyes fluttered open properly for the first time, their dullness replaced with confused clarity. Lila gasped and threw her arms around her. "Mom." Cole stepped back to give them space, but the woman's gaze shifted to him. She studied the giant man standing quietly in the corner, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, his eyes soft despite the sleepless nights. "You helped us," she murmured. Cole rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Just did what needed doing, ma'am." Lila shook her head. "He saved you," she insisted. "Those men were going to hurt us." Her small voice quivered on the last words. Cole laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one's hurting either of you again," he said firmly. He kept his word. That afternoon, he rode straight to the mining office. The men there paled when he walked in. Cole didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stated what would happen if anyone approached Lila or her mother again. By the time he finished, the room was silent, and every man there understood exactly where they stood. When he returned home, Lila was feeding the chickens, her laughter echoing across the yard. Her mother sat on the porch wrapped in a quilt, watching her daughter with tired but peaceful eyes. The sight warmed something inside Cole, a part of him he'd long tucked away behind hard work and loneliness. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Lila helped with chores, brushing horses and gathering eggs with enthusiasm Cole hadn't seen in years. Her mother, still weak but gaining strength, mended torn saddle straps and stitched buttons back on Cole's shirts as if she had lived there all her life. Their presence changed the ranch. It felt brighter, fuller, less empty between the walls. One evening, the three of them watched the sun melt into the horizon, painting the world in gold. Lila leaned lightly against Cole's arm, small and trusting. Her mother looked at him with gratitude that went deeper than words. "If you hadn't come," Lila whispered, "I don't know what would have happened." Cole looked down at her, his voice low. "You were brave enough to run for help. That's what saved your mother." But Lila shook her head fiercely. "You saved us," she insisted. Cole didn't argue. For once, he didn't feel the need to.